doing our final project in computer networks on password attacks. We have about 3 different kinds that we're going to showcase today. We have brute force by Emily Musgrove. We have dictionary attacks by Audrey S, and then credential login surfing by yours truly, Hannah Jeffers.
Today I'll be discussing brute force password attacks. Ouch. These are extremely effective against weak passwords. In fact, research by Alexey Antoniov shows that of 193 million passwords, 45% could be cracked by a brute force algorithm within a minute. The simplest explanation as to what a brute force algorithm is that it attempts to find all possible permutations of the password within the allowed password range. Depending on the characters allowed in the password, a password of 8 characters or less could be cracked anywhere between a couple of minutes to nearly instantaneously. This functions as such. If you have a password that is only allowed to be 2 letters, it is going to try, and it's only allowed to be those 2 specific letters. All 4 possible permutations of those letters until it arrives at the correct password. The basic way to conduct a brute force password attack is to create a code that generates each possible permutation of that password. While generally a single brute force algorithm could be used to attack any login, there are ways to make the algorithm more efficient by identifying the password requirements of the site that you are looking to attack the password of. For example, symbols are not always allowed in all passwords, but they beef up the number of characters that a brute force algorithm has to look at when identifying a password. So if you know that the website you're looking at doesn't allow symbols, you can remove symbols from the allowed upon characters in your brute force algorithm, and that will result in your code being able to go significantly faster and with significantly less password attempts. You can also use these techniques in reverse. So instead of using them to make better brute force algorithms, you can use them to protect your password against brute force algorithms. Brute force algorithms are used by hackers and bots who are seeking to find login credentials to either use themselves or to sell in the black market. Having a password cracked can be incredibly dangerous, given that, according to Forbes Advisor, approximately 78% of people surveyed reported having used the same password among multiple sites. Thus, once a hacker is able to get hold of one of your login credentials, it is incredibly easy for them to use it across multiple of your accounts. This is especially true considering email accounts are the second most likely to be hacked, and your email is heavily linked to your other accounts. So if they get access to your email, they can know what other accounts you have because they can see where emails are coming from, because a lot of services that you have accounts with will also send you emails. They can know generally what your username is, especially if your username is referred to by the emails. And they can have access to multi-factor authentication and password reset opportunities through the email. Brute force attacks are cheap and simple and do not have as many barriers to success as other forms of password attacks beyond simply time. However, there are ways the individual and the website owner can protect against these attacks. There's a number of things that you as an individual can do to protect against password attacks. First being is that the length should be at least 14 characters in order to be not crackable within a reasonable amount of time. According to studies, a 14-character password containing only uppercase and lowercase letters, not numbers or symbols, will still take a brute force algorithm 17,000 years to crack. Additionally, making your password more diverse in the types of symbols used will increase the amount of time substantially that it takes to crack your password. For example, that same 14-character password, if you add uppercase, lowercase characters, symbols, and numbers, will take nearly 1 million years to crack. And finally, passwords should be unique to each account. That means no using passwords across multiple accounts, because once they find the password for one account, they will be able to hypothesize as to the passwords for multiple accounts. This will be later shown on by Hannah Jeffers in her presentation. In addition to the protective measures that the individual can take to protect their passwords, the website owner can take a number of protective steps, such as making sure that the admin credentials are incredibly protected. This is especially the case for offline brute force algorithms, in which the person gets access to a list of hashed passwords. So with those hashed passwords, they can then go offline and attempt to identify the non-hashed version of the password based on just guessing the password and seeing how that hashes and if that's similar to what the hashed password is. And they can do that when they get things like admin access, which gives them access to those large databases of hashed passwords. In addition to the protective measures that the individual can take to protect their passwords, the website owners can implement things like timeouts or maximum amounts of allowed attempts, or banning IP addresses if they make too many attempts. These all function as to make it so that a person who is using their own computer to do this brute force algorithm is not able to do multiple password attempts within a matter of seconds. They would have to wait some amount of time, which would generally discourage them from using your site. Additionally, bots are, while helpful in brute force attacks, are expensive and time-consuming to use, and thus banning IPs would be an easy way to get people on the lower level side of things from using brute force algorithms on your account. Finally, maximizing the number of attempts functions similarly to banning IP addresses, in which it just keeps a person from making multiple attempts on the same account. These are all ways that generally increase the time it would take for both low level and high level of hackers to identify a single password. Using these, you can protect your account. And it is ideal that you do so considering the very serious concerns about your online privacy related to having your account hacked.
This is an example of a brute force attack. This is my algorithm for showing both how a brute force attack can be done and how it can be prevented. This algorithm has a number of parameters, including target password, which allows us to simulate a login attempt by comparing the guessed password to the target password. Maximum length, which is the maximum allowed length of the password. And this is typically set at a much lower level, but for the purposes of this, we set it at 128, which is the maximum allowed length that most websites allow. Some choose to make that maximum length much lower. Case sensitive determines if it is important to identify if the character is a uppercase or lowercase character. Letters and numbers allows numbers to be allowed into the potential pool of characters in addition to letters. Symbols function similarly and allow symbols to be put in the potential pool of characters. Max attempts and time pause are both ways that the website owner can protect their users against brute force attacks, because max attempts sets a maximum limit at the number of attempts that a user can make on a single login. Time pauses the code to simulate the website owner stopping the user from making a new login attempt for a certain amount of time. This greatly increases the amount of time that these login attempts take, which would be discouraging and drive away potential brute force attackers. And timeout is more benefit to the brute force attack, since a password that's going to take much longer than they desire to wait around for to crack is not going to be in their interest to crack. So they're going to most likely set something up so that after a certain amount of time or a certain amount of attempts, it just gives up and moves on to the next password in hopes of finding a new password that is going to be easier to crack. This code right here just defines the potential pool of characters. Itertools.product and join A here are the two main ways of finding the potential permutations. The nested for loop and this join statement basically go through all the potential permutations in that maximum length with the provided characters, and allows it so that each of those permutations is attempted until it either gets to here, which is guess if the guest password matches the target password, then the login is no longer secure and the password could be easily cracked by the brute force algorithm, or it either runs out of time or it runs out of permutations to attempt. If it runs out of time, that means that your password is much more more likely to be secure unless the person is truly dedicated to finding your password. And we are going to simulate it down here. As you can see, I will be setting the maximum temps to about 50,000, which is just my way of saying that it doesn't matter because it's not going to get to 50,000. So we're just going to be simulating how long a brute force attack can go for without barriers put onto it. And I'm also going to remove the time pause so that we can see that as well. And the password is ABC. As you can see, it got the password in well under a second and with only 3,500 approximately attempts. So if we show what happens when you add numbers and symbols, we're just going to keep it to the same length, but we're going to add a number and a symbol. We can also add an uppercase letter, which simulates all the characteristics we defined as for a truly protected password. So as you can see, we set the maximum number of temps at 50,000, and it basically said that it could not find the password in 50,000 attempts. We can set this to a little bit higher, maybe 100,000. And it still couldn't find it in the maximum number of attempts. If anything, you can see this password is 4 characters, and it couldn't even get up to 4 characters in 100,000 attempts. So in all likelihood, that password would be protected against someone who's putting very little effort into it. But it would be better if it was 14 characters, because that would, as I mentioned, make it up to 17,000 years of time, which I don't have the time to show you, but if you can trust me on that, no one in their right mind would want to wait around for that amount of time. And I can also simulate the timeout on a much smaller password so that you can actually see the effects of that. We can go back to ABC, and we can remove all of these additional characters. And I'll show you again what it looks like without the timeout. So as you can see, it takes well under a second. But with timeout or time pause, which adds just 1/10 of a second between each password attempt, this brings it up to that's enough of seeing that. It brings it up to substantially more time. So this time pause is a good way of discouraging would-be brute force attackers from attacking your website, but it has to be implemented by the website owner.
The reason brute force is less effective when there are more characters added to passwords is because there are more options to test. Given 2 passwords, both 8 characters, but one only using numbers and lowercase, and one using lowercase, uppercase, numbers, and special characters, we can see the numerical difference. So given the 8-character password with only numbers and lowercase, we can see that there is initially 36 to the 8th options, and then if there is at least one number, then we can subtract 10 to the 8th, and then at least one lowercase, we can do 6 to the 8th, which gives us a total of 2.6, 1 times 10 to the 12th options that you have to test for. For the one with the lowercase, uppercase numbers, and special characters, we start out with 94 to the 8th minus 10 to the 8th for the number, 26 to the 8th for the lowercase, 26 to the 8th for the uppercase, and 32 to the 8th for the special characters. This gives us a total of 6.94 times 10 to the 15th options, which that doesn't really seem like a lot, but the difference between the two is 6.93 times 10 to the 15th. So there are 6.93 times 10 to the 15th more options that an attacker would have to guess through using 4 of these as compared to only these 2. So that's why adding more characters to passwords is beneficial for stopping brute force attacks. A common dictionary attack will use a version of a brute force attack that focuses on using pre-existing words in the password guesses. A more complex version of a dictionary attack will use words associated with a person, such as their child's name, the street they live on, where they were born, the year they were born, and things like that. An even more complex version will replace some letters in a dictionary word with a common replacement. So think, instead of the word home, they would do home, but this is a 0 instead of a O.
All right, so this is my little example for a dictionary attack. We have some general information here. We are saying that our target Alice likes cats. Their password is cat2. We have that written down here. We also have the minimum password length to check for, the maximum length password to check for, and then what characters we are going to use to check. In this situation, we are using letters and numbers, which is all uppercase and lowercase letters, and then, of course, all of the digits. We also have our brute force, which we're going to use to check against. It is very similar to what Emily showed earlier. It's just a slightly modified version of that. And then we have our dictionary. So we're going to say that our attacker knows a few things that Alice likes. So he made a list of those being pen, rose, cat, frog, and yarn. In practice, this list would be longer, and it might even be just a list of dictionary words as opposed to a list of likes and dislikes. But in this case, we are going to use this little dictionary, and we're going to use it to attempt to guess Alice's password. So we are passing along our password. This is just a check against. In practice, it would be like an attempt to log in that we're checking against. And then we have our minimum length, the maximum length, and the characters used, which we can gather from when you make a new account, you know the password requirements, so any person would be able to see what password requirements would work for a certain account. And then, of course, we're passing along our dictionary. So that calls this definition, which we have our count if it's found, and then it goes through the dictionary. It checks the difference in length for the word. For each word, this is so that a way, if the password isn't exactly the dictionary word, but instead it has a letter number before and or after it, it will be able to sense to pick up on those as well. So we are looping through that range of difference. So it does go through each having like nothing before it and nothing after it, having something before it, something after it, all of that. And then we will check if our guess is equal to the password. If it is, then we found it. If it's not, it will keep going. Every so often it will print out the count just so we know that it is still going. That's just kind of for our use. And then if all else fails and the password was not found using the dictionary, we just have it defaulting to go to the brute force. So if I run this here, we can see the brute force is going. There we go. So using brute force, we found the password being cat2, and it took 716,000 attempts to find. Using the dictionary attack with cat2, it took 11,892 attempts to find, which is significantly less. It is 704,000 less attempts than brute force. So it would definitely save an attacker a lot of time if somebody used dictionary words in their password. Generally, the rule of thumb to avoid being susceptible to dictionary attacks is to not use words or variations of words in your password, as another way that attackers can try and guess passwords as if they will change the dictionary to also include things like changing the zeros in some words to numbers or changing some to special characters. So generally, as a rule of thumb, your passwords should not contain dictionary words or likes or dislikes or anything associated with you in your passwords.
So, another password attack we want to talk about is credential stuffing or credential surfing. Hello, Professor Kelly. Hope you're enjoying the vacation. So, this is a cyber attack in which a breach of data has been hit from an attacker, and they take all the listed usernames and passwords from this data breach, and they try to use those into other credentials, to other accounts they want to log in for. So like, let's say for example, everyone has their Ursinus account, right? Let's say that got breached, and now everyone's usernames and passwords have been taken. For example, we have a username, and we have a very uncreative password. Oh no, that has been stolen. So, someone who grabbed this could try to sign into my Ursinus email. They could try to log into the bookstore. Or they can try to log into a social media account, let's say, like Instagram. So by trying to use this pair of username and password and try to log into different accounts, they hope that the human mind likes to use the same, they can reuse the same emails and passwords and usernames over and over and over again. They're hoping to find something that connecting to this that's used the same one and try to get that information. So statistically speaking, it has a very low success rate, about like a 0.1%, so that for every 1,000 accounts an attacker makes, they will succeed roughly once. However, just because there's a small percentage of something, it still makes the attack worthwhile. And going back to the brute force method, while having a much longer and more complicated password could help with brute force attacks, it's not necessarily going to stand up against these type of attacks, because it doesn't matter how long or short or complicated that password is. If it's the same for any one of these things, then it's going to get hacked no matter what. So it's pretty straightforward how you want to defend against this. Just have a unique password for each account that you make. Have a unique password, have a unique username, so that the attacker can't just use, if something did get breached, like Ursinus' Okta account, if you did get breached, then they can't use that to try to log into your email or into the bookstore or into your Instagram or any sort of login they can use for. And also on the side of like sort of added security measure, this two-factor authentication also adds a higher security measure to it. Thank you.
As we can see here, I have some code to demo what credential stuffing or credential surfing is going to look like. I have two main methods. First, I have this text to dictionary method, which takes in a text file and separates the username and passwords and make it into a dictionary with the key being username and the value being password. So it's going to be understood that the attacker has the breached data of usernames and passwords that they will then use to compare to another set of data. So it is understood, the disclaimer is that the attacker would not have this data with them. They would be using this breached data and trying to log into other services, like maybe this example is a store website that they use, like Amazon or something. And they're trying to see if they can maybe use these username and passwords and try to log into another store like eBay or Walmart or something, and they want and see if they can get those types of data. Or maybe they use the same username and password for a bank account that they have attached with the Amazon account. That is what this data here represents. So the attacker would not have access to this data. They're just going to use the breached data and see if it'll work, if they can log in successfully. For the purpose of this code demo, we need to have this other data to compare usernames and passwords. But it is to be known that this entire set of data is not known by the attacker. So moving on, so in this method I have here, we are opening the text file, we're reading the text file as a file, and then we're going through each line of code and stripping away the spacer between the username and password, which in this case I have labeled as space tilde space. It could be anything separating it. So yeah, then I'll be taking the first instance and it'll be splitting that as well by the colon to get the actual username, same thing with the password to get the actual password, and then saving that in a dictionary with the key being the username and the value being the password, and then returning that data. So then in the second method right here, this is the main one, it'll take in both the two data sets, the breach data and the other data, is going to translate them into dictionaries. And then we're going to check to see for every username in the breach data set, the set that we know, for every username in here, if that username is in the other data, if they try using that username into the other data, and if that's in there already, okay, awesome. Then they try to check to see if the password tied to the username from the breach data is the same password as the username tied with the other data. Because of this is because attackers hope to use users that reuse the same passwords and usernames for similar accounts. So what this is, what these lines of code are representing here is another login page in which they are using the username from the breach data set into another data set. They're going to be using that username and the password saved with that username. And they're going to check to see if it's in that other data set and if the password works and they can log in. If it works, then the login succeeded. If it doesn't, then the login failed. Then this other else statement here is just to say that, well, what if the username is not in the other data? What if they didn't, well, that username is just not in the data in the first place? Then it's an automatic fail because it's not in there in the first place. Attackers use this to try to, they put in a username and password pair into other data sets, and they keep going and going and going until hopefully they hit something. So that's what this is going to do. So when we run it, we see no compile errors or anything. So then when I run this right here, so as we can see from the breached data set, there are a couple login succeeded, meaning that they're using the same username and password in not only the breached data set, but also the other data set. So then that means that login is compromised, and they have the attacker has succeeded in getting some of those accounts. From the looks of it, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. About 10 have succeeded. This is usually never the case. It's usually 1 in 1,000, but I wanted to showcase what it looks like on screen to see the potential harm it could have.
Thank you all for watching, and we hope you learned something new today. Make sure you take better care of your accounts and make sure no one else could get into them.
Otherwise, I'm gonna come get you.
No!